Hello and welcome to another episode of Why Do You Believe? A series that I do that just to keep me from listening to an echo chamber. I like to take a chance to reason with people who hold disparate opinions or different opinions from my own. So today I have on Eric Hernandez. Now, I did a video recently where I was talking about what faith means, as I understand it, and I've been criticized by a number of believers telling me that I got the wrong definition. So we're going to go over that. And Eric, specifically, what would you say is the problem with my definition?
Well, I'd say that you seem to, as I've seen in your videos and you said in that last video, you seem to understand what the word pistis means. And I would say that is what the Greek word, that's the Greek word that's used in the Bible. So we would know that that means something like trust or confidence. Yet in public, or when you have any kind of discourse like this, you say that faith is a belief without evidence and defended against all reason and all that stuff.
Yeah. Would you now? Pistis means, has a handful of meanings, much like faith still does. There are different contexts.
The English word, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, I don't because it causes people confusion, but I can say that I have faith in my wife. I can say that I'm a faithful husband, which means something very, very different than religious faith. So I specify precisely which context I'm talking about. I'm only talking about religious faith. Now, if pistis means a combination, or depending on the sentence that it's used in, it could mean conviction, it could mean persuasion, it could mean belief, it could mean faithfulness, trustworthiness, a number of things like that. So the original word pistis, I think, was divided in English into a number of other words that cover the different contexts a little bit more precisely. Not entirely so, because faith still has two contexts, at least just within itself.
Well, if I can interject here, right, but obviously the New Testament was written in English, right? So the Greek word being
the New Testament was written in English?
It's not written in English.
Okay, right. That's what it agreed.
So and then given that we get pistis from the New Testament, in that Greek word, why would you use the term religious faith and then give it a different definition? Because
of the reason I was just explaining. So with faith, the English version of one particular context of that, where then you can say that faith is a belief or that faith is a trust, doesn't really matter which of those who you use. The context is always implied that it's going to be based on loyalty, that you're believing it because you're told to believe it and not for any other reason. So when I say as...
And where are you getting this from, you said?
What?
You're getting this from where?
The context in which it is applied.
You're talking about biblically?
Yes.
Okay.
So the Bible is always expecting that you are going to believe, and this is not just the Bible, this is also the Bhagavad Gita has a similar interpretation of faith, as does the Quran.
But you're talking to a Christian, right? So we'll stick to the New Testament.
Okay. But if we have a word that transcends, doesn't matter which religion it's talking about, in all the different religions, we get the same thing.
Okay, well, I can't speak for all of the religions. I can only speak for the New Testament. And no, it's not used as believing without evidence or believing in spite of evidence.
Okay. So I'm making a negative claim here. I'm saying that faith is a belief that is not dependent on evidence.
I understand that.
The reason I'm saying that is because there is no implication in any holy book that the belief is going to be based on any kind of, and we're being specific again. We've talked about subjective impressions, circular reasons, assumptions of authority, things like that. Things that people will subjectively consider evidence, but we're, again, being very precise. I'm talking only about religious faith, and religious faith is not based on empirical evidence. So in saying that it is not dependent on empirical evidence, you are told to believe the thing. And like in the Quran, for example, it says exactly like the Bible does. It says that you believe in what you do not see, or else. And the Bible is very clear about that. You will believe it or else.
Okay, but to not for neither one of us to go on long rants, how about to make the conversation a little better, you can ask me what I believe instead of telling me what I believe or what other religions believe, and I think that'd make...
I'm not asking you what you believe. We're not talking about what you believe.
Well, you're saying that faith is going to be this, and every religion is going to be this, and everything's going to be this. So you're giving me a lot of assertions, but since you're talking to someone face-to-face, you can just ask, maybe you can say, what do you think about my perception or position or view on this? And I can give you my
Okay,
opinion.
well, I was getting ready to do that,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter what you believe, to be quite frank.
Okay.
We're talking about objective truth. We're talking about what we can show to be true. Okay?
Right. Sure.
So
that has to do with
that
what I
I
said.
can show that I am using the correct usage, the correct interpretation, that faith is a belief that is not dependent on evidence. So to say that it is, if you want to take a counter position, the only implication I think would have to be that you're going to say that it is dependent on evidence. And therefore, you got two things that you're going to have. You're going to have both a statement that the evidence dominates regardless what somebody wants to say. You know, test it out yourself and see. Like in my video, I presented a quote by the Buddha, who was giving, believe that only because the evidence says so, not because of what anybody else says.
Yeah, but you're not talking to a Buddhist.
Right, I understand that, but we're still talking about objective truth here.
Right.
So if the Bible had said something similar, where it said, believe this only because the evidence indicates that, and disbelieve it if evidence indicates otherwise, then you would be able to say that faith is based on evidence.
Which it does.
Which it doesn't. It nowhere in the Bible does it say that empirical evidence.
Here's where you can ask
override or change. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that empirical evidence can override or correct or dissuade a faith-based belief.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're letting me talk here. So even Paul said, if there's no resurrection, Christianity is not true. So and then he says, here are the people you can talk to. He mentions witnesses. Now, whether or not you believe the resurrection would be beside the point. The point here would be that he is saying, here's what we believe and here's why. Here's the people we've spoken to. The book of Luke is written entirely, starts out with, I've written an account of the things that have happened so that you would believe. So they're giving evidence. They're giving reasons. So you can't say it's not based on evidence.
No, I can, because they're
sure you can, but it doesn't make you right.
They're giving hearsay for their reasons, and they're saying, like in the example.
So an empty tomb would be hearsay.
I'm sorry, what?
An empty tomb would be hearsay. And earlier you mentioned empirical beliefs. Why do you always go to empirical? And even in
because we were talking about, because the term that I was using, and I was being very clear about this, and I think everybody agrees that religious belief is not based on scientific evidence. Now, scientific evidence would be empirical evidence. I'm just being clear.
Okay, so let's be more specific. So God, well, you said religious. I mean, there's a lot of claims about religion. I mean, Christianity would say the universe had a beginning. That could be tested empirically, right? There would be scientific evidence to show that the universe had a beginning.
Well, then there's a problem, because I already know a physicist who says the universe didn't have a beginning.
Well, I didn't ask if you knew anybody who didn't. I know a lot of people who have a lot of weird beliefs, but that's not
okay. Well, we're not talking about a guy with weird beliefs. We're talking about a cosmologist. Yeah. We're talking about Sean Carroll, who's
right.
Never had a beginning.
Okay, so the principle though is, when we're talking about God, I would absolutely agree with you regarding when you ask for scientific evidence, because I would say that is a category fallacy. You saw the video I made where I was critiquing you, asking for scientific evidence, which is something that only studies the physical. To study something non-physical would be a category fallacy, like trying to use a metal detector to try and detect plastic.
Except that it's not in this case, because if the supernatural were real, then we would have, as I've explained so many times, we would have, a Spock, an Obi-Wan, a Hermione. Somebody would be able, a Gandalf. Somebody would be able to demonstrate that there's a there, and that even if science couldn't explain it, they would have to acknowledge that there is at least a recognized phenomenon, a verified phenomenon, to indicate that such a possibility exists.
I don't think you get my point, but what do you mean by verified phenomena?
We can't just say that anything is possible, because we know many things that are not possible. And so it is not possible, for example, for a cow to jump over the moon, for many different reasons having to do with physics.
Can I just to get on the same page? So when you talk about possibilities, are you talking about modal logic? Are you talking about metaphysically possible, logically possible?
Again, we've been talking about science.
No, if we're talking about God, we're talking metaphysics.
I'm sorry, what?
If we're talking about God or anything,
okay. So you're going to admit then that I was right in my definition, and that we don't have empirical scientific evidence of God, because by your own admission, we can't even discuss God without it being metaphysical.
That you were right in your definition. I don't think
that it is not based on empirical evidence, because all discussion of God must therefore be metaphysical. Therefore, it can't be empirical. Thus, their faith is not based on empirical evidence, and I was right all along.
Okay, well, so I haven't heard you say faith is not based on empirical evidence. And again, faith is
Well, you did, actually. You were in the room when I said that faith is based on, that faith is...
Interrupting me. You're going to have to let me talk. So faith is trust in something. Faith is not an epistemology. It's not a way of knowing something. It's right. Once you have whatever you're looking for, then you make a decision, a volition to put your trust or faith or confidence in something. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a case by case. When it comes to God, yes, I would absolutely agree with you that you're not going to use science to detect something like God because it's a category fallacy. It would be like me trying to measure my weight by using a ruler.
Okay, so you're going to say that it's a category fallacy. Mm-hmm. And you're also going to say in the same conversation that it can be testable scientifically, that the universe, the origin of the universe can be tested, for example. There are a number of ways that we can test God claims, and all of them fail science.
The universe had a beginning is not a God claim. So again,
and that's not a test of Christianity, is it?
Asking me questions would be helpful. You said religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. The fact that the universe had a beginning, I'm a religious.
But that's not a fact. If we have a dispute among cosmologists, then it's not a fact. The fact is something that we can verify. And it depends on what you mean by beginning, too.
So, going back to what I was saying, because you're jumping all over the place here.
I'm not. I'm trying to stay focused.
Okay. We talked about religious beliefs. I'm a Christian, which is a religion, and part of my beliefs as a Christian is that the universe had a beginning.
Okay.
Now, that's not a God claim, but that is a claim within my religious belief system. So you have to be, we have to apples and oranges here. So yes, when we're talking about God, absolutely, I would say it's a category fallacy to try and look for empirical evidence or scientific evidence.
Except that quite a few people do say that they have empirical evidence and they can never produce it. And they argue with me.
Okay, well, I'm not.
When I say that faith is not based on empirical evidence, they argue that I'm wrong, which would imply that there is empirical evidence. And clearly there is not.
Well, you can invite them on your show, but you're talking to me here.
Well, I am talking to you. You're the guy that said I was wrong when I said that faith is not based on empirical evidence.
You said faith is a belief that is not based on evidence and
not based on empirical evidence. I was very specific, and I said that when you were in the room.
The listeners can go back and watch the video.
The listeners can also watch the video that I uploaded where I included the entire scene, where you asked the question and also where I specified that is based on arguments from authority. It's based on subjective impressions. It's based on logical fallacies, perhaps, but it is based on. But it is not based on empirical evidence. I did specify that, and I included that scene in my video.
So faith is something that's not. So trust is not based on empirical evidence.
Again, we're mixing contexts. If it means faith, if it means belief, depends on the context of the sentence. But in either case, it's not based on empirical evidence. So it's not based on science. It's not a conclusion that you reach scientifically.
Faith is a conclusion.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, if it's in the terms of a belief, then yes, it would be a conclusion. A conviction also, if you want to use that word, would be the same thing.
So if I believe, and so again, be helpful for you to just ask questions. If I believe that...
Why would I ask questions? What am I supposed to ask? I don't understand. Why are we asking?
A lot of assertions and accusations and saying like, well,
I'm sorry, what?
You're making a lot of assertions.
No, I'm not.
A lot of which don't apply to me.
No, not one.
And going back to, if I have...
What assertion do you think I've made? And especially one that doesn't apply to you.
You're saying that any kind of evidence or reason that I have to believe in God is going to be based on a logical fallacy and the other...
I said on anything but scientific evidence. So, and you're admitting that it's not based on scientific evidence.
Right, because it's a category fallacy. When we're talking about God... It wouldn't
be a category fallacy when people are also saying in the same breath that they can prove scientifically the beliefs of Christianity.
Are you talking?
And so I have to argue that you cannot prove scientifically. So do you agree that you cannot prove Christianity scientifically?
I agree that you cannot prove nor disprove the existence of God scientifically.
Granted. Great. So we're both on the same page, and my definition was never incorrect, and I didn't need to be corrected about it.
So your definition, which in the video you said faith is pretending to know what you don't know.
Very often is, yes.
Very often. So
every time, yeah, because when you state who and what God is and what God will do and what God hates for what reason, right? You are making assertions. You are stating as fact what is really baseless speculation, but you're asserting it as fact. You're not doing the preface of, I believe. Now, if you did, I believe, and then put in X. It doesn't matter. But you're stating X is a fact. And that's the thing that irritates me the most about religious beliefs, that they assert baseless speculation as though it were a matter of fact. It's not.
Okay. I have not made any of those kind of speculations. I haven't made any much assertions about God. So again, you're talking to me, not other people you've talked in the past.
Okay. So I'm talking to a guy. I'm talking to a guy.
So baseless assertions, you even said in the video that it's impossible for God to exist, and even something like a soul is something that wouldn't even be possible.
Again, according to Sean Carroll, yes. And he's got even a physics formula for it.
So appeal to authority.
I'm sorry, what?
Appeal to authority?
No, not at all. If he's got a physics equation to it, then it's based on his math, and it's his argument. I'm not defending it.
If the soul exists, would it be physical?
It would have to be a transmission of the mind and our data and the physical peculiarities that make us who and what we are, that would then have to be transcribed into some immaterial being magical form.
Try it again.
What?
If the soul exists, would it be physical?
Originally, it was thought to be physical, yes, because the people who wrote the Bible didn't understand that air was particulate matter. But they knew that you would die if you can't breathe. So that's why translations of the Bible mix on. You wanted an answer to the question. Was it the soul? The reason that you believe you have a soul is because the people who wrote the Bible didn't know what air is.
That's the reason
they thought that air was spirit. So that's why in Ecclesiastes 3:18-21, where it says, "Who knows whether the breath." I'm sorry, what?
You're making an assertion again about me that is not even.
I'm not making any assertions about you.
So you're pretending to know things you don't know. Which
I'm not pretending anything. I'm giving the evidence argument.
You don't know why I believe in the soul.
The reason people believe they have a soul evidently is because the people who wrote the Bible didn't know what air is.
Talking to me.
Yes, and you are a people, and you believe you have a soul, and the reason that people believe they have a soul, evidently, is because the Bible didn't know what air is.
Evidently.
Yes.
So it's evident.
All the indications are. That's why, and I'm trying to give the evidence to support the argument.
That's not the evidence for the argument.
What?
That's not the evidence for the argument.
You haven't heard it. You keep shutting me up and telling me that it's immaterial.
You're talking about your argument that you're giving. Okay,
I was giving you the evidence to back my conclusion.
That I believe that.
The people who wrote the Bible had no idea what air is. I'm giving because there's actually quite a lot of it throughout Scripture.
Okay.
When I talk, what?
So in other words, you're saying people, which you say I'm part of. So you're essentially accusing me of believing in the soul because people who wrote the Bible didn't know what air was.
Yes.
Okay, that's not why I believe in the soul.
Okay. The reason that you are aware of the idea that people have a soul evidently came from this misperception.
Why do you say evidently?
I mean, that's what the evidence is. There is no evidence of soul, but there is evidence that people who wrote the Bible didn't know that air was particulate matter. They thought it was supernatural. So they thought it was the breath of life that you could like carve make a clay sculpture and bring the breath of life into it. That's the golem spell that would animate that and make it come to life.
You're jumping around again.
I'm not jumping at all. I'm staying on target.
We're talking about my beliefs.
We're not talking about your beliefs. We are not talking about your beliefs. Your beliefs are irrelevant.
So why are you talking to me?
Because you made an accusation that I was using the wrong definition, or that the definition that say that religious faith is not based on empirical evidence. You said that was wrong.
Right.
I'm here to explain that is correct. And you've already agreed that that's correct. Now there's further that we can go.
Faith is believing
other accusations too.
Pretending to know that you don't know. That is one of the definitions of faith.
Yeah, it's making the assertion, let's be specific. You have seen yourself that people have used that to assert that God is. Not that I believe God is, but simply that God is. So if you ever said God is the way and the truth and the life and all that, you are asserting baseless speculation as though it were fact. So if you're going to tell me you've never done that, well, that's fine, but you understand that most people do that.
Okay, so back to what I was saying. The accusation I had made was that it was seemingly disingenuous the way you present yourself, the way you define faith, and even said towards the end, faith really is pretending to know what you don't know. And then I also accused you in my video of having faith based on your own definition, since you assert things and pretend to know what you don't know, and there's speculation to what you're saying.
I don't.
I don't. You don't know why I believe in the soul, and you started going on a
I
rant
did give
about
the reason,
people in the Bible.
the evident reason why people evidently believe in the soul. Yes.
You were interrupting me again.
People, including yourself as a person, being a religious person, why all religions believe in a soul. Yes, it was because they didn't know what air is.
Okay, so what about people who don't even? Okay, no, try to track with me here. That's not why I believe in the soul.
Okay, that's not why you think you believe in the soul. Gotcha.
So you know why I believe better than what I do. You know the reasons I believe.
No, I know why people evidently believe in the soul is for this reason that is supported by evidence that
Let's jump to this because I accuse you. So baseless speculations, and that's part of being faith.
I'm not the one making baseless speculations. I'm the one that's making. I'm the one that's presenting arguments. Or excuse me, evidence.
You're giving assertions.
Position.
You're giving a lot of assertions, and none of
assertions because I'm giving evidence in support of a position. I'm not the one making assertions.
You're giving evidence that I believe something for a reason, which I told you I don't.
You don't know that this is the reason that people collectively devised religion, believing that they have a soul, is because they came with this idea that air was spiritual somehow.
So the existence of a soul goes way far back, and even people who are non-religious believe in the soul. There are atheists who believe in the soul. They believe in the soul because of the Bible.
I'm sorry, what?
Atheists who believe in the soul. They believe it because people in the Bible didn't know what air was.
As I told you, there are multiple religions that are based on this concept.
Talking about atheists.
And I was talking about religions.
You're talking about people, and you said I'm a person, and you said people believe in the soul for that reason. What about the atheists who believe in the soul? They believe in the soul for that reason?
Are you talking about atheists who are animists, or atheists who are Buddhists?
I'm talking about atheists who believe in the soul.
Who are Chinese traditional spiritualists?
Atheists who believe in the soul.
Okay, so if you're talking about Taoists or Buddhists or somebody who believes in supernatural things but also just doesn't happen to include gods, those people, those people would believe in the soul because originally people didn't understand what air was, but they knew that you would die if you can't.
So people don't come to believe in the soul for rational reasons.
Meaning empirical evidence?
So here, we're getting somewhere here. So you're assuming rational reasons must necessarily be empirical evidence.
Of course.
And what empirical evidence do you have that rational reasons must necessarily be empirical evidence?
So we're going to go to solipsism now?
That is not okay. Don't assume what you think I'm getting to.
I'm not assuming. I'm asking a question.
Not at all. I don't even know what that has to do with solipsism.
Okay, so it's just a frustrating thing for me that I don't have to get very far into a conversation with a believer before they immediately start questioning whether reality exists. And the best way to diffuse any evidence I present is to pretend that I can't prove that I existed 2 weeks ago.
You know what self-defeating means?
What's that?
You know what it means to be self-defeating?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
It means when you use, logical fallacies are one good example of that, where you defeat your own argument, like you did when you challenged me, saying that you have ways of proving Christianity scientifically, but you can't even discuss God without it being metaphysical instead of science.
Okay, whoa.
And that you said that I can't, and I'm using the wrong definition, but at the same time you also confirmed that I'm using the right definition because it can't be empirical.
Yeah, so that didn't answer my question. No, I never said you can prove God scientifically. I thought I was clear about that. It's a category fallacy. Self-defeating is when you make a statement.
When you said that you could prove claims of Christianity by the fact, for example, that the universe had a beginning, assuming that that was a fact to begin with.
We're talking about religious beliefs, and I said that people can rewind it and watch that for themselves. You're really not tracking.
People can rewind it and watch for themselves, yes, and I encourage that they do.
Okay, thank you. So, I never said, okay, no, we're gonna try to stick to what we're saying. So what was the last thing you said before you started talking about, it's self-defeating, right? So something is self-defeating is if you make a statement, and when that statement is applied to itself, if it proves itself wrong, then it's a logical fallacy. To say any evidence must necessarily be empirical evidence.
No, I didn't say, no, I specified again. And I did this earlier. We can wind back and play it again if you want, but we don't have to go through all this. I said, you can have subjective evidence. You can have fallacious evidence. You can have the conviction be the assumption of itself in circular reasoning, because question-begging fallacy is fundamental across every religion. But I specified that when I'm talking about evidence,
that's a question-begging statement you just made.
I specified that when I'm talking about evidence, I am talking specifically about scientific evidence.
So everything must be proven scientifically.
Did I say that? Did I in any way imply that?
I am asking. That's what you do when you have conversations. You ask the person, is this what they meant to clarify? And if not,
I did not imply that everything must be proven scientifically. There are things that can be proven logically. Not everything can be proven logically. Some things can only be proven scientifically.
Okay. Well, okay. So then evidence isn't necessarily empirical then. By what
I also said that we're talking specifically about empirical evidence. We're talking specifically about whether faith is based on scientific evidence.
You don't track very well because we were talking about evidence and I asked you.
Yes, I do track very well because I specified again and again, and you keep forgetting that I was talking about scientific evidence, not subjective evidence.
So
scientific evidence.
You interrupt every few words I speak. This is why I wanted somebody to be here as a moderator, because you do interrupt a lot. And then you don't even track with what you're saying. We were talking, I asked if evidence must necessarily be empirical. You said yes.
And I said no. I said I allow that there is such a thing as subjective evidence, but that in this case, we're not talking about that. We're not saying that faith is not based on subjective evidence. It certainly is. We're saying that religious faith is not based on scientific evidence.
Let me say this, just to try and be fair here. I did not once hear you say faith is not based on empirical evidence. Every time I hear you talk about faith, all you simply say is this mantra that you've memorized, that faith is pretending you know what you don't know, and it's belief without evidence and even against all evidence and against all reason.
Yeah, because we actually have arguments against the origin of the universe. We have arguments against the origin of the soul. If I bring you, as Sygart did the other day.
I didn't even finish my point. It's like you're not listening to understand. You listen to see where you can respond and jump in.
I listen to understand because my goal in life is not to believe things. My goal is to improve my understanding. So it would counter my own goal if I didn't listen to understand. You have a different goal, which is to believe and to defend that belief.
You don't have beliefs?
Pardon me?
You don't have beliefs?
Not in the context you do.
What context would that be?
To my experience, when an unbeliever says he believes something, that means, and I don't say it because I don't like to confuse people, it means that this is something I think to be true or is most likely probably closest to the truth, but that I don't know it to be true because I can't show it to be true. And if you can't show it, then you don't know it. But when a believer says they believe, again, to my experience, what that has meant is that it's an act of will, of mind over matter, to convince themselves of something that is not evidently true because they have to believe. And so when they give me the reasons why they believe, they're always incredibly vacuous. Like, I believe because I want to know that I'm going to see my dead father again.
Okay, because I want you to keep, because you're making a lot of, again, assertions.
Again, I'm not making any assertions. Okay. I was explaining to my experience, and that is correct. That is what happens according to my experience. So I have made no assertions.
So you claim that you don't have beliefs in the context I do because you think...
Because I don't make myself believe anything.
Do you know how beliefs work? How people come to beliefs?
Yes, there is, as I said, two different contexts. One that the unbeliever uses, one that the believer uses. The believer uses an act of will.
It's a yes or no question.
Believes regardless of evidence.
It was a yes or no question. I'm asking because I'm just getting clarity here. Are you from? So would you? Because it seems like you think that belief can be an act of will.
Yes, because believers have expressed exactly that to me.
Okay, well, I disagree with. Okay, so you really got to stop listening to what any believer tells you and actually look this stuff up, because what you're appealing to is what's called doxastic voluntarism, which I don't adhere to. Are you familiar with that?
Again, we're still on topic.
Or no.
No, I have not heard doxastic volunteerism.
Okay, right.
I have heard people say.
Yes or no?
I have heard people admit many times, many ways, that they believe what they want to because they want to. And then I've heard other people who profess to be objective.
This is
minutes later.
It's really hard to get to a point to where when I ask a yes or no question, you go on to another rant.
I don't get into rants. Not in this. In this conversation, I haven't sidetracked. I haven't bounced all over the place. I haven't made any assertions. None of that.
Okay.
You're the one that is not focused. came in here with 4 or 5 points that you were supposed to address, and so far we haven't addressed those. We've gone someplace else instead.
All right. So back to what we're saying. So beliefs are not things you can just will. No, it's impossible to just will a belief.
Okay. And so all the people I've talked to have said otherwise. They were all lying, or I'm lying, I guess, either way, right?
You gullibly just believe what people tell you.
I don't gullibly believe them, but that's what they tell me.
Okay, but if it's not possible, then whether they tell you or not can't be true, right?
It is possible to believe in a God that isn't evidenced in any way, and then just go about that.
Not what I asked. Can you just can you force yourself to believe something by just willing it? If I said I will pay you $1 million to believe that there's a pink elephant flying in the room, could you do it?
Well, let me see. Historically, we have had people offered land.
Can you do it? If I offered you, Arn Ra, $1 million, could you believe a pink elephant is flying in the room? Can you make yourself believe something by an act of will?
If it was something that requires faith, then yes. Now, I'm not of the philosophical mindset to do that, but we know we have lots of historical examples of that.
Say that again?
We have people who were offered money to believe. We've had people who were,
how would you know,
were threatened.
How would you know they actually believed it? Like how
you
could
don't, you don't. As long as they pay tithes to the church and support the system, doesn't matter.
So they don't believe it, you said? Is that what you said? Because you say one thing and you keep going. You're saying so they don't actually believe it?
We don't know. As you said, there's no way to know.
So then how do
some of these people do? There are people in my family
why would you say they believe
what they're told simply because they're told. And there's no amount of evidence that will ever convince them otherwise.
Okay, wait. So you don't know if they believe it, yet you're going around saying people believe things when they know it's
on an individual basis.
Okay, but I'm saying it's impossible for someone to believe something they don't take to be true. If someone believes something, they're going to have to believe it's true. That's part of what it means to have a belief. It's something you take to be true.
Mm-hmm. And so how do people change from one religion to another?
By analyzing the evidence and exposing themselves to more information.
There's no evidence. You said so yourself.
I said there's no evidence, or I said there's no empirical evidence because it's a category fallacy. So you're not tracking. That's proof right there. I have empirical.
Again, it's not a category fallacy if the premise is, as you said, one, that faith is based on empirical evidence, which was the thing that you said I got wrong.
Nope.
Now you failed to track that, and now you're saying that, okay, I was correct, that faith is not based on empirical evidence, and that you can prove the claims of Christianity using scientific methods.
No, my goodness. Wow. This is
okay. So what was your other complaints then?
Well, I've got a lot more now because you are not tracking well. You take one thing I say and then you jump to the next thing, or you assume something, or you try to kind of.
So in order to say that faith is based on evidence, we've established that you don't.
Can I first just what the point I was trying to get to earlier, and maybe this I hope it will help, was another when I said I was going to try to be fair. If you did say that faith is a belief that is not based on empirical evidence, then I did not hear that. So if you said that, I'm admitting right now to hear it. What I did hear and what you said most of the time, and in the video I made, the only thing you did say was things like faith is a belief without evidence, that pretending to know what you don't know. I did not hear the caveat, nor was it in my video, that it is specifically empirical evidence. In your response to my question, which wasn't even an answer to my question, it was a tangent. You said you're looking for scientific evidence, which I would concede and have conceded that yes, no scientific evidence for that.
So in the video that I made in response to yours, and which you said was not a response, I also there specified that normally when I'm having these conversations, it is with creationists who are trying to use scientific evidence to prove Christianity.
You're not talking to that person. You're talking to me.
Right. And right now, I'm talking to you and explaining something to you, which for whatever reason, you refuse to understand. So as I said, in that video that you said you watched, I said that normally I have these conversations with creationists who are trying to use science to prove Christianity. And normally I don't have to specify that we are talking about scientific evidence, though I did specify it in this debate with Inspiring Philosophy because I knew that he was not a creationist. I said that in my video.
Okay.
So now, as far as other things, now his disingenuous question that where he asked if I knew of a scholar in present tense and who specializes in Koine Greek who thought that pistis means denying evidence of reason. All right. Now, we understand that pistis means all these other different things. Only one of those contexts would be taken without scientific evidence. So, of course, that question is invalid. If I'm completely correct in my statement, then I would not know anybody specializing in Koine Greek who would say that that pistis means denying evidence or reason. That's not even my position. That is at best a straw man. Now, do I know of...
That's what you said?
What?
You didn't say that?
I didn't say what?
That faith is denying evidence or reason?
Faith is a belief that is not dependent on evidence. It's not based on scientific evidence, right?
Okay, so you're
so if you're going to say that if you're going to say that my definition is wrong, then you have to show that it is dependent on scientific evidence, meaning that it is repeatable and verifiable.
So are you telling me that the Bible defines faith as denying or going against scientific evidence?
Yes, multiple times, including one time where Jesus says that says to Thomas, "You believed because you have seen me. Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet they believe," making very clear that the true faith is one that comes without evidence. Anybody can believe if you have sufficient evidence, but the true faith comes when you believe it just because you're told to,
I don't
want to, and not because the evidence implies it.
I don't know what Bible translation you're reading that says faith is believing against scientific evidence. And what Jesus was getting at here was Thomas had sufficient evidence, and then he gave him more evidence, and then showed him the nail-scarred hand. So even there you could say.
And then says, "Blessed is he who does not," or "Blessed are they."
Yeah, because they're better off. Yeah, because they had the evidence they needed.
But they didn't. Blessed are those who did not see and yet believe. So what he's saying is that those who have seen are not blessed. It's only those who have not seen that are blessed. That's the true faith.
No. So,
and that's why faith is believing in walking in faith, not in sight. It's believing in what you don't see. And many different links that I put in, when I put in the video that you responded to, said wasn't even a rebuttal, I put in several different philosophers, theologians, and so forth who were explaining what faith is and their interpretations.
No, you put in people who were not specialized in Koine Greek, like Michael asked. It
wouldn't matter if they were specialized in Koine Greek.
Because that was specifically his question, and you put in someone like Dan.
Right, and it wouldn't matter, would it?
Really, Dan? You're going to quote Dan Barker as a scholar? Seriously?
As a theologian, because that's what he in fact was for many years of his life.
No, being a pastor does not make you a theologian. See, that's the thing. You don't even get simple categories within Christianity.
A theologian?
I'm sorry?
I believe his Wikipedia page lists him as a theologian.
So you're going to quote Wikipedia as your source?
Well, if he's declaring that he was a theologian, what am I supposed to say?
You're not, because he's wrong.
All right. So what is a theologian? Have you looked up what a theologian is?
Yes, and as you know, it's someone who would qualify as a scholar in theology would be someone who has a PhD.
Actually, that's not the first definition that comes up.
Right. So
it doesn't matter the scholarship, apparently.
Sorry, are you a theologian?
No.
Okay, so what is a theologian?
A theologian. I'm going to have to look it up myself because I don't want to get this wrong. And this is not
because when we're talking about scholars, you know exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about theologians. Dan Barker is not a theologian, much less a scholar.
Okay, a person who engages or is an expert in theology, and he spent decades of his life.
That just spending decades does not make you a scholar.
Okay, but it doesn't say scholar here, does it?
I didn't say it said scholar.
Okay, well, very good then.
It's a person who spent. Say it again.
He spent decades of his life in this.
You're reading the definition of a theologian.
Let me see. Where was it? Hold on a second. Oh, I don't want to close this. Okay, I can't minimize it. Who studied in or is an expert in either or in theology.
Okay, how does one become an expert in something?
No, it says engages in or is an expert in.
You engage in theology, do you not?
No.
No?
No, as I explained to Cy Gart the other day, I don't, he says I'm a terrible theologian. I'm sorry, it's absolutely right. I don't use theology at all. Theology is the appropriate interpretation of a particular scripture. I'm, he wanted to accuse me of being every bit as bad as a creationist in that I read the Bible literally. I'm like, that's absolutely right, I do. And I can understand where it's obviously metaphorical, and the creationists don't understand that it's metaphorical. Like Genesis, for example, we know that there was never a tree.
My question was,
knowledge of good and evil.
What's theology? What's theology? What's theology was my question. I don't know why you went to the Garden of Eden.
I was explaining to you what theology is. I was answering your question.
It's the study of God, yes?
Yeah, you could summarize it as a study of God.
That's literally, okay.
Okay, so Dan Barker is a theologian because he studied God.
No. So we're talking about scholars and experts, and then you went to Dan Barker.
Well,
then you
engages in or is an expert, so it's an either or. You don't have to achieve expertise to be a theologian, apparently.
So I have
ADHD. If it was a requirement,
I thought I had
to qualify, at least according to his own description.
I thought I had a problem with interruption, and I thought I've worked on it because I have ADHD, but you interrupt far more than I do, and a lot, and you're not tracking with me.
Okay, well, then let's get back on topic. You had some other...
Here is, if we're talking about studying God, looking into the existence of God, then you would be a theologian, but you wouldn't claim to be a theologian. Dan Barker is definitely not a theologian, nor is he an expert in it, just like someone who studies science doesn't...
All right, well, I think Dan Barker has described himself as a theologian. I wouldn't want to call him a liar on that, but I don't want to pull a quote on him either. He was described as a theologian. I'll leave it at that.
So if I describe myself as a scientist, you'd believe it? And if I put it on a Wikipedia page?
There's a way to show whether you're a scientist or not. It's whether you engage in science. My question. I think the minimum requirement for that is that you publish your research to peer-reviewed journals. That would be the minimum criteria.
Has Dan Barker published any peer review?
I wasn't accusing him of being a scientist.
Well, I mean, so that's only a requirement for scientists, not anybody else?
I didn't say that was the only requirement. I said I thought that was the minimum requirement. Okay. I may advocate science. I may actually even perform science. But if I don't publish to peer review, then I don't think I've met the minimum criteria.
Okay, then Barker wouldn't be a theologian.
Why?
He has no expertise in it.
Well, he does apparently have expertise, but this is not the thing that we're supposed to argue about here.
Right? No, you're right. But my point is, you really stretch at things, and you try to make things that are not.
I don't.
Yeah, you do. Calling Dan Barker theologian is a huge stretch.
It's not a stretch at all. But let's let that be. So you don't want to say that he matches the standard definition. You don't want to admit that. That's fine.
That he's not an expert.
You can argue that with him. I'm not concerned about it. I put up many different citations that also prove the point. And I'd like to mention one to you since you called me out for this. And do you remember the question you asked me verbatim?
Not verbatim, but basically given, so I'm glad you asked that you're finally asking questions here. One of my main accusations was how disingenuous your alleged 20 years of research seemed. And it seems like you're on this script. And if I could just be honest with you, it's very evident you're on a script because...
I'm not on a script. I'm doing this freehand.
You know what I mean when I say...
No, I don't know what you mean.
Well, then
I'm not on a script. I've had the exact same argument that I'm having with you over and over again for 20 years. So I'm pretty well rehearsed in what nonsense I'm about to hear. If that's what you mean, then okay. But I'm not on a script otherwise. So
here's why I say you're on a script. In 2014, you had a debate with Matt Slick. It was 5 years ago. And in 2014, you told Matt Slick when he asked you how you know something that you were knowing, and you said, because I've been doing this for 20 years, which means you have not even updated your own script in at least 5 years. To still say you're doing it for 20 years, yet you said that in 2014, you have not updated your script. It seems like you have not really even looked into this stuff.
I became an activist in 1997. It's 20 years, 22 years.
So then you were lying back then.
No, I wasn't lying.
Because
I'm rounding.
Asserting facts as though they are facts, and they're not facts.
No, so I'm not. As I said, it's been over 20 years since 1997, but it's easier to say 20 than 22. It's fine. It doesn't matter. We're just rounding it.
Okay, right. But you're asserting, we're just right. Yeah, it's a real good way of putting it. We're just rounding it. It's not that you're on a script. No, of course not. It couldn't possibly be that. Couldn't be that you're being disingenuous or whatever. No,
of course not. I'm an honest person. So yeah, it couldn't be that. And
you expect me to take your word on faith?
No. But thank you for acknowledging that that's what it would be.
Right, it would be a trust that I would confide in you, right? Which quite frankly, I can't say I do because the track record hasn't been too good.
So you assert without evidence since everything...
No, that is evidence. You said in 2014 you've been doing this for 20 years. You said in 2019 there's a 5-year gap there.
Mhm.
Haven't updated your script. You're asserting facts as though they aren't.
You know what? You know why?
I
hadn't counted up. I hadn't counted up from when it was 1997. So what year is this? No, that would actually be 19 years or 18 years. You're right. So I'm just rounding. I'm making an estimate, and that's approximately correct. And it still is. When I say 20 years now, and it's actually been 22 or 22 and a half or whatever, that's still correct.
Okay, so you run it up, run it down.
So when I get up to 24, 25, I might say that I've been doing it for a quarter of a century. And I think that would be approximately correct too. So the question that you asked me verbatim, do you remember it?
Right. So is the fact that given that you couldn't name a scholar on the spot, yet you're so adamant about this definition,
yeah,
on the spot, given that the topic of the debate is Christianity dangerous,
mm-hmm.
It seemed to me that your alleged 20 years of research is flawed, biased, and dangerous to the pursuit of truth.
Well, then let me backtrack on a couple of things that you missed. One, it was a disingenuous question because if I'm absolutely correct in my position, then no scholar would ever say that pistis, which now we know means a number of different things, and only one of those contexts means or implies that it's without faith. We know that nobody would ever say that pistis means exactly verbatim denies evidence or reason, that it would have to be a belief or a conviction or whatever, maybe taken on trust or what have you, or taken on the word of authority, but not necessarily. So nobody would ever, if I'm absolutely correct, there would not be an expert in Koine Greek that would agree with that. That's if I'm correct. Got it?
Okay.
And you said I needed to name a scholar, and I did say that it is implied this way. And yes, I do have scholarship. It's just not somebody specialized in Koine Greek, because it wouldn't have to be specialized in Koine Greek.
But
the argument is.
But it would.
No, it wouldn't. And the reason that it wouldn't is because of where we're arguing, and you've already conceded this point, so you're re-arguing something you've already conceded, that faith is not based on scientific evidence.
Would you?
Have plenty of scholars that say this.
Okay, yeah, and tell me why I say it's not, that the belief in God is not based on scientific evidence.
Because it's not.
No, why do I say?
There's three reasons.
Tell me, I want to make sure you understand my position. Why do I say that that belief in God is not based on scientific evidence?
Okay. The three reasons are, and you will have another one, which is the excuse that it's metaphysical.
Why do I say that? Don't give me reasons. Why? What was my argument that belief in God is not based on scientific evidence?
What was your argument that I was right? You didn't make an argument that I was right.
No. Okay. So you're rephrasing the question. You're not tracking. There's a reason I said that I wouldn't claim to have scientific evidence for God.
Okay, so in that one, that was the one I was just saying that you interrupted me on, when I said that you will have another reason, which is the excuse that any discussion of God is going to be metaphysical. But for me, in order to say, if I'm incorrect, if I were wrong about faith, religious faith being based on scientific evidence, then you would have to have three things. You would have to have first the statement that the evidence overrides the assertion, regardless whatever the assertion is, that empirical evidence can also be repeatable, testable. Scientific evidence can also disprove a faith-based belief, which of course we know that neither the Bible nor any other religious book will allow. And finally, the big one, and this was the one that I mentioned during the debate, is that you don't have scientific evidence. And so how could you even say that it was based on scientific evidence if you don't have any? And I thought I made that explicitly clear.
When have I said that my belief in God was based on scientific evidence?
When you told me I was wrong about my definition being based on scientific evidence. Now, I know that tonight, you said that you didn't hear that. That's fine. I accept that. So now we're going on, what is faith based on? Faith is apparently based on authority, trust in authority. And we do have plenty of scholars who do agree with this. And even people that you would consider theologians definitely agree with what I state here.
Like who?
Huh?
Like who?
Well, Blaise Pascal was one.
And what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? What was his quote?
In Pascal's wager, within Pascal's wager, he makes the admission that faith is not testable.
No, I don't think that's what he makes the admission of.
Okay, I'll look it up.
And again, when we're talking about Greek, because see, as you
not talking about Greek.
Earlier, we're not talking about Greek, pistis.
No,
really?
No, it doesn't matter because we're translating into English, so we're talking about English.
When the Bible writes something in Greek and the context of the way it's used in that Greek word.
And now we're talking about what Blaise Pascal said. What language would you like that in?
Well, so here's what I'm saying. I'm getting at, even regardless of what Blaise Pascal said,
Okay.
and you want to get into that later, we're talking about the Greek word that's written in the Bible. Christians who read the Bible and see that, translate into English, but knowing the Greek word is pistis, in that context, pistis being the trust or loyalty is based on evidence, based on past experience.
Except that it's not based on empirical scientific evidence, which we clarified.
Why do you assume?
And that I clarified numerous times.
Why do you assume things must be based on empirical evidence?
Because we're talking about science. We're not talking, we are not, I just want to clarify, we are not talking about what you personally have, your personal religious beliefs. We're talking about whether faith is based on scientific evidence. Done.
Okay.
So
what was my
Pascal's comment, by the way?
No. My question was, why are you assuming that any kind of evidence must be empirical or scientific? Why? Because, okay, is that what you're saying? That any evidence
because I don't want to be fooled into believing empty assertions that are evidently true.
Okay, so do you have empirical evidence that empirical evidence is the only evidence that could exist?
Again, you're not tracking very well, because I have already repeatedly clarified for you that we are talking about science, so we're talking about empirical evidence, and I understand that other types of evidence exist that could lead to a religious conclusion, but that they are not scientific evidence. Please don't make me keep clarifying that point.
Okay, so if we look at something like, okay, if everything that has a shape has a size, that's a metaphysical principle. It cannot be proven scientifically. There's a lot of things science must assume before you can even do science. As it's been said, science is a slave to philosophy. I don't know why you're putting so much emphasis on science as if it is the only domain or way to gain knowledge.
Because I see it as such.
I'm sure you do, but it's
obviously not a way of gaining knowledge.
You're right. It's not, and it's not claimed to be either.
So what do we have that actually will generate knowledge, or that we can gain knowledge?
What is knowledge?
I say that science doesn't know everything, but religion doesn't know anything.
Yeah, you have a lot of little sound bites like that, right? That you just memorize, right?
It's not that
Yeah.
How is it wrong for me to understand the argument after having had it so many times?
So,
I mean, you're going to criticize me for knowing this argument because I've had it so many times. And in the same breath, you're going to criticize me for knowing it so well.
An assertion is not an argument.
Good. That's why I'm not using assertions. That's why I'm using evidence-based arguments, trying to give you the evidence.
You said science doesn't know some things, religion knows nothing. That's an assertion.
That's true. Well, no, that's a statement of fact.
Okay, that's not an argument. That's an assertion.
No, it's not. It's a statement of fact.
Which isn't what you asserted. Did you not assert that?
I didn't assert anything. It's a statement of fact. Religion doesn't know anything.
You can't assert.
No religion. No religion can show that they have any more truth, that they have any truth to them at all, much less that they have any more truth than some other religion. None of them can.
What truth are you talking about? Because you're jumping all over.
I'm not jumping all over anything. You are. I'm the one trying to stay focused, and you're the one that keeps changing the damn subject. The truth is what the facts are, what we can show to be true. We can't just say that, whatever that we want to believe is the truth, because we have theologians from all different religions.
I want to get back to my question. Do you have empirical evidence that empirical evidence is the only kind that can be had?
No, that's why I never made that assertion. And so we're going back again to where I have to explain to you again that I didn't say that I didn't allow other kinds of evidence. You can have subjective evidence. I've now told you this, 4 or 5 times? What is your excuse for not getting it by now?
First, you keep interrupting me.
Don't bring this up again, and don't accuse me again of things I still have never done, as if I've done them again.
So
now,
I'm asking a question.
You asked me to name a scholar.
I'm asking a clarification. I'm asking a clarification. Are you implying, and again, it's a question, not an opportunity to you to go on another rant.
I didn't go on a rant.
Are you implying that if it's not scientific evidence, it's subjective evidence?
I said I would allow for objective evidence. I also said that not everything can be proven scientifically. Some things can be proven logically.
Okay.
I specified that, and not everything can be proven logically. There's some things that can only be proven scientifically. I specified that too. How many more times will you make me repeat these answers before you get them?
So
would you like to hear a scholar? Since you asked.
All
right.
Okay. Okay. Hold on. I asked these things not to challenge you. I'm really trying to get
You're
clarification.
not challenging me.
In other
I
words,
just think you are.
do you know what I meant by challenge? In other words, I'm not trying to push back on what you're saying. I'm trying to get clarity. See how you take everything so defensive.
No, I
You have
don't.
to,
I'm not defensive at all.
yeah, defend yourself.
I brought you on here so that I could reason with you because you've made a very clear and obvious mistake. And so I'm
Really.
here
And
to help you.
that you naming a scholar who specializes in Koine Greek. Defining faith.
Once again, I repeat, why do I have to keep repeating this? If I'm absolutely right, then every scholar in Koine Greek will agree that pistis means belief or conviction or trust or whatever, and that only one of those has the implication that it is without scientific evidence. So no expert in Koine Greek would say what the disingenuous question assumed, that pistis means denying faith or evidence. If I'm absolutely correct, they won't say that. So of course, I'm getting a scholar that doesn't say that, who doesn't follow the straw man of what I never said or held or believed. I'm actually getting somebody who supports what I actually said. Do you want to keep barking at the straw man, or you want to give it up?
I haven't been barking at all, actually.
So you won't bring up Koine Greek again because after the fifth explanation, you get it now?
I am telling you.
So you understand, just clarifying, do you now understand that any expert in Koine Greek is going to agree with what I said, that pistis means all these different things and not necessarily without evidence, certainly not denying evidence or reason, unless it's in the context of the way that the word is used, right?
Unless it's in the context of the way the word is used.
Right. If it's implied
that
you are supposed to believe this simply because you're told to, or simply because of this authority, or because you're going to go to hell if you don't, then yes, that's the implication.
No, it's not the implication, and neither do I see that in Scripture. And again,
yes, it certainly is all throughout Scripture.
We're agreeing that pistis is confidence or trust, yes?
It can be a confidence, it can be persuasion, it can be trust, yes.
Okay.
It is not dependent on scientific evidence.
And then you throw that last thing in there at the end, which I don't even think is relevant.
Because that's my definition. That's the definition for all the dictionaries, for all the theologians, so on. From the beginning on down. Yes.
So
Jesus on down. Yes.
Confidence or trust. So when the Bible talks about pistis, it's talking about confidence or trust.
And the implication and the way that it is used, blessed is he who has not seen and yet believed, walking in faith, not in sight. We trust not in what is seen, but what is not seen. Rely not on your own understanding. Believe what you're told.
Exegete that for me, please.
I'm sorry, what?
Exegete that for me. What those passages you just quoted. What does that mean?
What does what mean? Which one?
Passages you just quoted.
Exegete. Which one? I just quoted several of them. Which one?
Pick one.
Walking in faith, not if you'd had actually watched the video that you said was not.
I did.
If you had actually watched the video that you said was not a response, you would have seen citations explaining that religious belief is assuming that you're hoping that this position is true and then continuing on as if it is true. So you hope that this is true. This is the faith is the hope that it's true, not seeing that it is true. You don't get the evidence of it. You simply assume it and believe it.
Okay, so tell me what you think of this analogy. And I heard Tyler really use it earlier, and I thought it was a good one. Let's say because it seems as if you're implying that evidence must be something that you can see. Is that the case?
In the implication of the Bible, yes. They don't have a nuanced view of it as we do now, but yes, they think that evidence is something that you see.
I'm asking about you, not what
because you see, not because I told you to.
I'm asking R and Raw, do you think that evidence is something that necessarily must be seen? You don't, right?
Evidence in one way or another can be detected, even if we have to use other instruments to do that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be seen. There are ways that we can detect things like redshift, for example, things the human eyes would never be able to pick up.
Here's what I'm getting at, is that you're making, and I know you're going to say you're making a lot of assertions that I disagree with, and you make them so many at once that it's hard to track.
Okay, what assertion do you think I'm making?
So when you talk, so first of all, you're assuming all these things about religious people and believers, the assertions that you think, okay, even earlier that we never even got to finish because we jumped to so many topics about, you think why I believe in the soul, and you said, here's why I believe it. And
I realize that you don't realize that. You think it's for a different reason, but collectively, people in general have this belief because they got the idea from a misunderstanding of the content of air.
And then you even said that you know there's no soul, you know there's no God, and it's impossible for that to be the case, which I think is absurd.
I said that's evidently true. I didn't say that I knew that. I said this is the argument of what is evidently true, and I can show the evidence to back it. Why do you have to misrepresent everything I say?
So you don't, it's evidently true, but you don't know it. How can you not know something that's evidently true?
Because science goes exactly opposite of faith in that we don't pretend to know things we don't know.
And you think I pretend to know things I don't know?
Again, if you've ever said that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, then you've made an assertion of baseless speculation that you have stated as fact. And that I find to be wholly dishonest.
Why is it not a fact?
Because a fact is objectively verifiable data.
Objectively verifiable data. And by objectively verifiable, what do you mean by that?
A fact is either a point of data that is not in dispute, like say taken for granted for a hypothetical situation or an element of a story perhaps, or it is something that is indisputable in that it is something that can be objectively verified. You don't take as fact something that somebody asserts unless it's a hypothetical situation. So if somebody's going to state that something is a fact, that Jesus is, or that God will do this or whatever, then you have to show some substance for that. Now, if we're just talking about within the confines of the story, and the story clearly says that, okay, well, the fact within the story is fine.
What objectively verifiable? Can you answer that? What do you mean by objectively?
I don't have to believe you, right? I don't have to accept what you say on faith. There's a way to check it. I mean, often I have arguments with people about religion, right? And where they will say, the Bible says X, and I will say, no, it doesn't say that.
My question, objectively
I was answering the question.
It's a very long-winded way of answering the question.
You wouldn't have any idea since you interrupted me again, so you don't know what the answer is. But when people tell me that the Bible doesn't say that, I can say, yes, it does say that, and I'll show you exactly where it says that. And then they'll say that the Bible says this other thing. No, it doesn't, and you can't show me where it doesn't, because how do you show somebody where something doesn't say something? I can only show where it does say something.
Okay, my question was, what do you mean by objectively verifiable?
The example I just gave, and you're not tracking very well.
So that you can.
If you want to say that the Bible doesn't say X, and I say that it does, I can show you where it does. And now we're both looking at where the Bible says that it does say that. And that's objective verification. We have the fact. We have the fact that is independent of either of our opinions. And the interesting thing about that is, because I can challenge myself just as well. So I may remember things, and I've gone through this, where I remember things where I think vividly, and then when I go to check the data, I prove myself wrong.
Okay, so
something incorrectly.
Okay, so you gave me and I'm not pushing back in a challenging way by this question. When I asked for what do you mean by objectively verifiable, you gave me the example of, here's this in the Bible. No, yes. Let me show you.
So the definition of the word objectively means that it doesn't depend on an individual's opinion or perspective. So the fact of the matter, we can check, and it doesn't have to be my opinion on it. I mean, we can verify. And my opinion could be wrong, and I just misremember it. And then when I check the data, when I actually read what it says, maybe I remembered it incorrectly, as has happened before.
Can you define objectively verifiable? I know what objective means, objectively verifiable. So, or would this definition work? Something that well, no, I'd rather you say it, because don't give me an example. Give me like an actual working definition. Objectively verifiable means not, here's an example of
again, a fact that we can both verify, regardless of faith. You say the Bible doesn't say that, I say it does. We crack the book open and see if it actually says that. We're both looking at it. So there we go. Now we know.
So you're saying right, or I am. So you're saying objectively verifiable means something we can both verify. That was your definition?
Exactly. Well, to be specific, it's something that doesn't depend on an individual opinion or perspective. So what the book actually says is regardless of my opinion or perspective.
Okay, but you used the phrase objectively verifiable.
Right, and I explained it 4 times.
No, you did not. You're defining objectivity right now. What is objective? But objectively
And
verifiable.
verifiable means that we can both check the fact that is independent of our perspective or our opinion.
So here, can I challenge you on this? And I do mean that. And can I push back here? See, here are the things that you're asserting that I don't agree with a lot of your definitions, because I think your epistemology is all over the place. I think that your perspective on things is flawed. And this is why I would say it's biased to the pursuit of truth.
And maybe that's why I have the perspective that you are all over the place and I'm trying to stay focused. And so you're accusing me of the very thing that you're doing through projection.
So if something's not objectively verifiable, can I call it a fact?
No.
Okay.
Much like the truth.
Just a yes or no.
Honestly, you can't honestly declare that something is the truth if you can't show that it is true.
So you have to show that it's true before you can claim it's true?
Right. If you make an assertion of, if I assert anything and I don't have the evidence to back it up, if I can't show it, that I can't show that it's true, then I got no business saying that it's true. I have to be able to show the evidence that implies that position.
Okay, so if you tell me you're in pain, I can't objectively verify that because that's a mental state and consciousness is not physical. What's that?
You can't verify it.
Okay. So then how would you objectively verify that? And if you can't, then I guess you can't claim it's a fact?
I think there's probably ways of laboratory testing to see if I'm in pain, that certainly, but you wouldn't be able to test that on the fly, no.
I'm not talking about the fly. Take whatever experiment you want. You can objectively verify what tests the mind?
Yes.
How?
And it's not just the mind. There's also sensory apparatus and a number of different ways that we can tell how the nervous system is going to respond to certain types of damage that they can detect and so forth. Yeah, there would be ways of objectively verifying whether I'm in pain, though it may not be possible for you to do that. So if I tell you that I have a headache, you don't know for a fact if I'm lying.
Well,
it would be very difficult to determine that.
So, because here's what I'm getting at here, because it goes to challenging your definition. I would say consciousness is not physical. I would say there'd be no physical impairment.
And I would say that consciousness is definitely physical. I'm sorry, it's wrong. Consciousness is definitely physical.
If I interrupt you every time you were wrong, you wouldn't be able to say anything.
Well, if you contradict me every time that I'm wrong, then you shouldn't have interrupted me yet.
Okay, well, actually, you interrupted me.
Okay, but I haven't been wrong yet.
So, if consciousness is not physical, there'd be no way to empirically or scientifically test it. You're saying that someone could detect scientifically or empirically that you're in pain. How would they do that?
The same way that we verify that consciousness is definitely physical.
How?
And they could even read thoughts into speech at this point. There's many different ways that we can see the mechanics of how the brain works, how the nervous system interacts with the brain. All of it is entirely physical.
So you're saying it's physical because it can see things happen in the brain.
Physically, yes. There are electrochemical signals to verify. They can detect love, which was a favorite argument that people used to say, well, you can't prove there's such a thing as love. Yeah, there's actually chemical signature for several different types of love.
Let me just jump to it because it's hard for me to get anything out, so I'm just going to have to just jump in there. My thoughts can be true or false. No part of my brain can be true or false. The mind is not the same thing as the brain, nor is it reducible to the brain.
The mind is a product of the brain, by definition.
So is the mind physical or not? I don't agree with you there, but is it physical or not physical?
It's objectively verifiable. Doesn't matter what you believe. The mind is a product of the brain by definition and also by verification.
Physical or not physical?
Physical.
Okay, and how do you know that? Because you see things happen in the brain.
Because we can also chemically alter the brain, both through basic chemicals or also through damage to the brain.
So that proves that therefore we know that the brain is physical.
Yes.
Okay, but you
and also beyond that, we can also.
But you presuppose the mind is just the brain.
The mind, once again, I repeat, is a product of the brain. The mind is the data that is produced by a brain.
And who defines it that way?
I don't know. I don't know who defined it.
So you haven't looked into the philosophy of mind then?
No, I haven't looked at who defined the mind as being a product of the brain. I'm sure somebody did. I could look it up. Does it really matter who?
It does, because it shows once again that your alleged 20, maybe 2 years, whatever you said, of research is not very good for detecting truth.
Understand, I've had this argument for 20 years.
If you have not looked into this and you're making assertions.
Hello, I'm not the one making assertions.
You're making a lot of assertions.
What I have had is 20 years worth of people telling me that they have scientific evidence for God.
I don't say.
And me saying, no, you don't. For 20 years, we have this argument. And that's what I've been doing. And you said that doesn't exist. I'm sorry, it has. And I've actually got documentation to show it, because I do have 20 years worth of arguments on the web that we can show. So yeah, that actually happened.
That matter.
What?
Point is, what does that matter?
It matters that you're wrong again, as you have been like every fucking sentence since we started this. And you've been accusing me, and we haven't even gotten to the topic because you have bounced everywhere. And we've been trying to stay focused. You said you had 4 or 5 points that you were going to address, and we haven't addressed them. Except
we're addressing one of them right now. Is that one of my accusations was that you're being disingenuous,
and that's wrong. And I demonstrated that.
That your research was flawed and biased.
Which is obviously not the case, because I've already shown you that I can give you documentation on the web for 20 damn years. I can show you the debate we had with Kent Hovind months ago. How many times have I argued with creationists that give this exact thing? When I argue with anybody that says they have scientific evidence. Only when I argue with Cy Gart the other day, when he said he had scientific evidence and then conceded that he didn't.
This is why we can't get anywhere. You keep interrupting me. This is why I wanted a moderator.
Did you see that discussion I had with Cy Gart?
I believe so.
Okay, so you saw where he said that he had scientific evidence and then realized that, and then conceded that he didn't.
No, I haven't finished my point, right?
Okay. So is that a yes or is that a no? You saw that he said he had scientific evidence and then conceded that he didn't, right?
I don't remember that part, honestly.
So I got 20 years of that. Okay, and that's what I can verify, because I can show, you can watch videos, so you can read the articles that I've written that have been in correspondence with other people or debates that have been online.
Okay, so you
so
really,
it isn't disingenuous, it isn't dishonest, it isn't a lie, it actually happened.
That wasn't my point.
Well, you wanted to say that there was something flawed or biased about it, and I prove that's not the case.
I say
I give these specific examples, and you can't contest any of them. All you can do is do the no true Scotsman fallacy. Well, that guy's arguing, and I get that, because there are as many different perspectives on Christianity as there are Christians.
You done?
Am I done? I think we probably are. So,
well, I mean, with your rant there, because I didn't. That wasn't my point.
Okay,
that was not my point.
Make a point.
Well, if I can even get a sentence out, it'd be nice.
You've gotten plenty of sentences out, and I've only had to correct about half of them.
So my point was, like what we just talked about now, I'm challenging the way that you present or look for evidence. I'm challenging that as being flawed. You're saying
flawed.
That was the end of my sentence.
Okay, how is it flawed?
For example, if you're going to say there's no soul, and then saying that you haven't even looked into this field of study, which studies these things, nor have anyone who defines mind as the way you do, then you are obviously biased, and you're coming up with your own definitions that you can't even name someone who's an expert in the field.
How do you imagine that I'm biased?
I just told you how. You don't even look into this stuff.
I do. That's yet another false statement out of a long string of false statements from you. So I do look into this and have looked into this many times, but I have never seen any evidence that a soul is even possible. And once again, I need to repeat how we determine whether something is possible. Can we say that something is possible when it evidently isn't?
Is a soul evidently not possible?
It is not evidently possible. And according to Sean Carroll, it is evidently not possible.
Okay, define evidently possible. How do we know whether or not something...
It is supported by evidence.
No, that's not what evidently possible means. Possibility, and are you talking about logical possibility, broadly logical possibility, metaphysical possibility?
I clarify again that we're talking about science.
I am not. If we're talking about the soul...
All right, then we don't... Do we have anything further to discuss? Because I'm not going to talk about metaphysics. I'm going to talk about things we can verify. I'm going to talk about science.
Metaphysics.
If you don't want to talk about science, you can go on and talk to somebody else. Do you have anything to say to me now?
Well, if you're saying you want to end it, that's fine with me. We haven't even gotten where you keep interrupting me.
I'm sorry that you didn't
I
focused
disagree with
and
your
wanted to change the topic to philosophy or metaphysics, but we were talking about science from the get-go. Now, if you want to stray from that to talk about something else, go talk to somebody who's interested in something else.
So, because I disagree.
No, I didn't. It has nothing to do with whether you disagree. We're talking about science, not metaphysics.
I have not been talking about science. I even said that in the beginning.
Okay, then we've wasted the whole last hour and a half because I've been talking about science, and that's what this whole thing was about. It was never at any time about what you personally believe.
You've been making a lot of philosophical assertions.
No, I haven't. We were talking specifically,
scientism,
exclusively about science.
You've been talking about epistemology,
not metaphysics.
No, you've been talking epistemology, which is a branch of philosophy, and you've been inferring scientism. You've been talking philosophy.
I haven't been talking about scientism, and I know what scientism is. No, I haven't been.
You've been
talking specifying that faith is not based on scientific evidence, and we know that. And if it was based on scientific evidence, then as I pointed out during the debate, then you and many other Christians before you would have been able to give what that scientific evidence is. But despite the fact that I've had 20 years of various different believers telling me that they have scientific evidence of God, they can never come up with it. You know what they usually come up with instead? Well, you can't explain how life started. That's what they think. The logical fallacy of God of the gaps. That's what they think is evidence of
is that relevant to, why is that relevant to me?
Because it directly addresses the false accusation you made against me. One of them.
Which was the accusation that faith is not a belief that's not based on evidence or goes against the evidence, or that
specifically
faith
scientific evidence.
No.
Yes.
So,
and as I verified, we have a number of religious organizations that have posted.
Look, I try to.
We have a number of religious organizations that have posted statements of faith wherein they admit that they will not change their mind despite any scientific evidence to the contrary.
Earlier, I tried to be charitable and say, if you said that, I didn't hear it. Mm-hmm. Hence, that would imply my accusation was specifically your statements and assertions that faith was against evidence or against reason or pretending to know what you don't know. That was my accusation.
I got that. Okay, I understood.
Right. Then,
so I was just adding that we have religious organizations that do post statements of faith saying that they will not change their mind regardless of any evidence to the contrary, scientific evidence.
No, I've had atheists say the same thing. What does that prove?
You haven't. You have not had atheists say
really
that they would deny scientific evidence.
Wow. So not only do you know everything about what I believe, or rather, you know why I believe. You also know the people I've talked to in the past.
Yeah, cough it up.
So you are making assertions as facts as though they are facts, pertaining to know what you don't know, which by your definition,
an accusation against me, and you were wrong every time.
And you're making an assertion
about some unnamed other person who says things that nobody else would say. So yeah, I'm going to call that out. I don't believe you. So
okay, that's fine to say you don't believe me, but don't say it's never happened, because it has.
Okay, it's possible that you ran into an incredibly stupid person. I grant incredibly stupid people exist. But there's no reason any atheist who calls himself an atheist, as opposed to calling themselves a Buddhist or a Taoist or whatever, would ever tell you that they are going to ignore scientific evidence. No.
Didn't you call that a no true Scotsman's fallacy earlier?
No, I didn't.
It applies to me, right? It only applies to me, but it doesn't apply to you as an atheist.
Oh, no. It's not. There's no false equivalence here. There's no. If you're a Muslim, right, and you're going to speak on behalf of Christians, is that a no true Scotsman? If the whole
but if you're an atheist,
okay, if the purpose of being atheist, the purpose of being Christian is to believe that Christ is your savior, right? The purpose of being atheist, you're going to accept scientific evidence, right, over faith.
That's not the purpose of being an atheist.
Oh, gee, what would I know?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out.
So I get told all the time that the reason I'm atheist is because I just want to sin, or some other equally wrong answer from me. But it really comes down to this. The reason that I'm atheist is because I don't want to be fooled into believing something that is not evidently true.
And that's why I'm a Christian.
I only accept things that we can show to be true. I'll leave open any possibility if you can show me that it is a possibility.
So that's an interesting epistemological position you have, which is a branch of philosophy. You can only believe what can shown to be true, but you cannot show that very statement to be true. So why do you believe it?
What do you mean I can't show that statement to be true?
You should only believe what you can show to be true. Show me that that's true.
Documentation to show that. Yeah. Yeah,
In other words,
I will entertain any possibility if you can show me that it is possible.
Okay, so anything,
but I won't necessarily be convinced of it unless the evidence implies that, unless I'm compelled by the evidence to believe it.
Same here. So something is possible as long as there's no logical contradiction. That's where you get strict possibility.
If, as I said,
correct,
you can't say that something is possible if it's not. So how do we verify whether something is possible? We have a precedent or a parallel or a verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. So if you don't have that, then we have no possibility.
Okay, so you can't verify something's possible unless you have a parallel. What else did you say?
A precedent or parallel, right? Something that indicates that possibility. Like, of course, we know that this can happen because this other thing can happen. It's the same process.
So
or we have a verified phenomenon. Remember what I said about if there was such a thing as a supernatural?
So it was a simple question, though. So
it's a simple answer if I could get through it. So
I thought you did.
What?
I thought you already gave me the answer. Parallel or something preceding.
And then I'm trying to explain what that is because you didn't understand.
No, I did.
The verified phenomenon would be if there was a supernatural, for example, we would be able to have somebody demonstrate that supernatural things do in fact occur, whether that's exorcism or faith healing or magic spells or whatever the hell it is. And for arguing with creationists, for example, whether we want to talk about whether evolution is possible, well, we can demonstrate that evolution actually happens at this level. So we actually have a mechanism that works, and then we just need to extrapolate from there. So that's what I mean by establishing that there's a verified phenomenon. Another good example, Big Bang, right? We have the red shift implying the universal expansion.
Okay, so
we have a verified phenomenon indicating that such a possibility exists.
We know something is possible if we have a verified phenomenon that it's possible. So we know it's possible only if it's possible, is essentially what you're saying. What I'm saying,
if we can show that a possibility exists, which if you want to put it that way, if you want to phrase it as a tautology, fine. If we can show that there is a possibility, then we can say that there is a possibility.
So if a possibility exists, and it exists, that's a tautology. You have not described or asserted or moved the conversation forward at all. Something is logically possible if there's no logical contradiction.
Again, I did move the conversation further by saying that we have to have a verified phenomenon to show whether a possibility exists.
So it's right? So you're saying a possibility exists.
So you want to say that God is possible, but you can't show.
I did not know. I'm saying I disagree with your tautology that you have horrible definitions.
Whatever it is you want to believe in.
That your epistemology is all over the place and
not all over the place. Okay, we're obviously not going to make any headway. I'm sorry that we had this. I really wanted to get to at least some of the points that you brought up against me. I thought that this would be fairly concise. But just like it was with Tyler Villa, we ended up spending 2 hours not beginning to get to the point. So it's very, very frustrating. You guys are so very defensive. I don't know where to begin. So an hour and 45 minutes, we've done nothing so far, except that you did concede that I was correct about religious faith not being dependent on scientific evidence.
Belief in God not being dependent on scientific evidence is what I said.
I'm glad we got that far. If I could achieve nothing else, at least we did that.
I never even accused you of.
What's that?
I never accused you of saying that faith.
Yeah, your video got lots of other people chiming into me to tell me that was correct, that was incorrect, that I had already been corrected about whether religious faith was based on scientific evidence. So that's why we're having this conversation, so that people understand.
People understand what? I'm sorry?
So that I will stop having these people chime in to tell me that faith is based on scientific evidence. Because that's what I've been hearing from creationists for 20 damn years, like I keep telling you.
Okay, but you also said that in 20 years, people always argued the definition of faith with you. So which one is it? That they either used it that way or they don't use it that way?
What do you mean, which one is it?
So you in the debate with Michael Jones, you said, every Christian I've ever debated tells me I'm using the wrong definition of faith.
Yeah, they all tell me that it's based on evidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
So which is it, Arn? Are people saying that it is based on scientific evidence?
Which is it? The thing that matches the other thing? It's both those things.
Okay,
so I made two statements that agree with each other. That I've had 20 years of people telling me that they have scientific evidence, and then I show that they don't have scientific evidence, that they in fact have a logical fallacy they're calling scientific evidence, but that it doesn't qualify as scientific evidence. And then we have to argue about what scientific evidence is, and that's when they start telling me that I can't prove whether reality is real.
Okay, Arn, if your entire position is that belief in God is not based on scientific evidence, you've wasted 20 years of your life thinking that. because
Except that I'm arguing with creationists who do exactly
you're talking
want to
to
teach
me.
in school.
You're talking to me.
They want to teach in school that they have scientific evidence for creation. And one of the claims that they make for scientific evidence of creation is that nobody can explain how life came about or what was the origin of the universe or what have you. Or they want to make up some other lie. And they want to do the God of the gaps fallacy.
Okay, there's
fallacies are not evidence. And I have to have this conversation over and over and over again.
Yes, you repeat yourself over and over again, but a lot of what you're saying does not.
I think we're done. If you saw the debate that I had with Hovind, you would have seen everything that I just demonstrated here repeated a bunch of times. And now you're going to tell me that it never happened. Okay.
I didn't say it never happened. I did not say it never happened. I said it doesn't apply to me is what I said.
Who cares if it applies to you?
Because you're talking to me.
It doesn't have to apply to you. It's irrelevant.
So you don't care what I have to say. It's irrelevant, yet you invited me on here to talk about this.
Did I invite you on because I don't care what you have to say? Obviously, I care what you have to say. But your personal beliefs are irrelevant to any of these claims. Sorry, it just are.
Okay, but I've never...
You're going to tell me that I haven't had the 20 years experience that I actually did have, that I can actually objectively prove that I really did have. And then you want to tell me that
I've never denied that.
Because it doesn't apply to you. But it doesn't matter if it applies to you.
I have never denied that Christians have told you that.
Okay,
I am saying I've never denied that. I said that
you shouldn't have told me that I didn't have these experiences for 20 years that I actually did have.
No, I'm saying that
I agree you actually had those experiences for 20 years.
I agree that you had those experiences for 20 years.
Thank you.
I've never denied that. What I was saying was that, so see, and this is what I'm saying. We want to get on the same page here, which we have not done, and I'm fine if you still want to end it. My point was that if the fact that you couldn't name a scholar in 20 years, so I was implying
that I can, many of them.
Okay, right.
But not for the dishonestly worded question.
I at least want you to understand what I was saying, because it seems that you don't. I never denied you had those experiences.
Okay. What is it you're saying?
Well, that when you can confidently assert something, and yet you have not looked into the field of what you're asserting about,
which is already a mistake, because I have looked into the field.
So something like philosophy of mind, you've looked into that.
Yeah, when you asked me for the scholar, I got the scholar. It's just according to the disingenuous question. So if I get asked a fallacious question, I don't then have to support the fallacious question. Okay? So when I'm trying to explain to some creators how we are apes, and he demands that I prove how he's not an ape. That's literally what somebody asked me 3 days ago. And I said, well, how can I prove that you're not an ape? I just said that you are. So don't do that to me again. If I found a scholar who actually does agree with what I said, that's not the fallacious question. The question remains fallacious.
So the example I was giving when you cut me off was, in other words, I was trying to go back to the debate. I was trying to, what we've just talked about here, look, philosophy of mind. I asked you who defined mind that way. You said you didn't know, which shows me you have not looked into this field of study, yet you're so adamant about what you believe about it.
So because I don't know what was the name of the first guy who comes up with the
I don't know anyone who defines mind that way. Okay. Atheist or Christian scholar who is in the philosophy of mind. Not John Searle, not Dennett what?
Dennett does.
Well, he does away with the mind, does away with consciousness.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does.
No, he doesn't.
Okay. I'd encourage you to look up.
I was told by a PhD professor of philosophy that Daniel Dennett denied that the mind even exists, that he himself, Daniel Dennett, doesn't exist. And I had no idea how to answer the guy because I'd never heard such poppycock before. So there I am standing there facing the guy, and I got nothing to say. So I have to go home and look it up. And then sure enough, I find it both in text and on video. I found where Daniel Dennett said the exact opposite, where he actually said that the mind doesn't exist in any one part of the brain, but that it is an emergent property of the entirety of the brain. So he does define it the way I said, and I have looked into it, and you've done nothing but false assumptions since we started.
I will appeal to the experts here who specialize in this, like an atheist philosopher, John Searle, who has a conversation with Dennett, which you can look up online, and they talk about this very subject.
Okay. But you understand that I've already read it, and I've already seen it.
You read what?
And it says the very thing that I just said.
Okay, right? That's okay. Right? That's fine. That's fine. I don't want to go into a tangent. My point is.
Yeah, I don't either.
When you can't name people who specialize in these fields that you're so adamant about and you have strong beliefs in, then Dennett does not define mind as data.
What would you call it then? The information? Because that's what I define
No,
data as.
I would say that things like consciousness are defined ostensibly.
Okay.
That there's 5
But
states.
I still include the consciousness as part of the data, but that's me. So it's
Okay.
a product of the mind. And as he said, it is an emergent property of the totality of the mind. It's not
Even then,
necessarily from a single region of the brain.
even then, you'd be a property dualist, and dualism adheres to immaterial properties.
Except that I'm quoting what Dennett said, right? So it's not me, it's him.
Okay, if you believe that, you'd be a property dualist.
Yeah, I looked into this.
You
So
look.
is there any other false accusations you want to make before we close?
I think this is clearly not a false accusation. You think it is, but
I don't think you've made a legitimate accusation so far.
Okay.
You've made a lot of false ones.
like your
You haven't
defense.
made a legitimate one so far.
You don't interrupt. That was an accusation.
Yeah, I do. Correct. And when you start a premise on a false premise, your conclusion is going to be equally false.
Okay,
So,
don't conflate false with you disagree with. Those are two different things.
no, when you state something that is actually false, yeah, I'm going to correct that.
Like the mind is data, like that.
Like my experience, like what I have said, what I assume, for example, what you imagine to be my assertions, that you want to try so badly to try to find a logical fallacy that I'm implying, which I'm not actually employing at all. Stop. I'm not doing that.
Okay.
All right. Eric, thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I would like to say just one thing in closing. I mean, I did find some things from St. Augustine, and there's a quote that is popularly attributed to him, wherein he says that let me see, was it? Let me hold on. Here it is, where he reportedly said that faith is to believe what you do not see, and the reward of this faith is to see what you do not believe, or to see what you believe. And the funny thing is that quote appears to be unsourced. I couldn't find the original document that came from, but it's being repeated by a number of different apologetic sites. So the Christian groups really like that thought, regardless whether he said it or not. And then what I found that he did say was that, let me see, as you might never have said that, but I repeated it many, okay. Looking for legitimate sources, I noticed that St. Augustine wrote an article called On the Profit of Believing, wherein he says that the religion set before him since childhood by his parents commanded that he have faith before reason. And then there was another article I found called Faith and Creed, where Augustine backs what I said about circular reasoning, assuming scriptural authority instead of seeking evidence, when he explains that the only proofs backing his religious opinion, as he put it, are interpretations of scripture. So it is circular reasoning. And there was one other article I found. He wrote another treatise called Concerning Faith of Things Not Seen, wherein he opens with the admission that Christianity commands belief in what is not seen. He mentions proof in that article, but not saying that there is proof. He uses it as an apologetic to explain why we should believe without proof. And all of that demonstrates my position. So that was the answer to the question about the scholar, but not a scholar in the fallaciously worded question that he had. So
Okay.
now that I've said that, I think I'm completely done here.
Can I just say something to that?
Yes.
Okay. So, and it is a shame. I do think we needed a moderator, because I think we could have had a better conversation. But like, it seems that you had assumed when he talks about things not seen, I don't think that is denying anything scientific, because you can have trust in something even though you don't see it. And Augustine was admittedly poor with Greek. People would argue he was very bad at Greek. He even said he didn't like his Greek teacher, so he didn't want to study Greek. That's why it was important to go to the Greek, because it was written in Greek, and in the context of the Bible, anytime you see pistis, it's talking about loyalty, and there's reasons given behind the things that they believe. You might not agree with their kind of evidence, but they are having evidence for what they claim to believe.
And it's not scientific evidence, nor is it relevant what pistis means. We both understand what pistis means and why it's not relevant to this argument from Augustine.
And why is it that you, like, when you're talking to a Christian who may use the word pistis in another way, why instead of taking what they define pistis to be, why don't you just not correct them instead?
Okay, because the whole point of this conversation was to state that there was no scientific evidence for this, and that pistis was never, that I never said that pistis, with all its multiple meanings of belief and confidence and persuasion and so forth, ever meant denying faith or reason. I said that pistis in the context of faith, and then specifically in the context of religious faith, was not based on scientific or empirical evidence. That's what I said, and that's what I was misrepresented as saying something different.
Okay, well, like you say, we can end it here. They can go back and watch both videos. Video I made, your
and
video.
They'll see that I'm right. Yes. Please go back and watch both videos. But watch the video that I made in response to his and see if I justified my positions with actual theologians that you would accept as theologians.
No, I looked at some of those quotes, and yeah.
Yes, some of the quotes were not theologians.
Some of those
definitely were, even by your understanding.
I'm trying to not that specialize in Koine Greek. And
again, Koine Greek is not relevant
and
in the context of how it's used in the scripture.
And Michael clearly went over that even in the debate on how it's used in scripture. I mentioned a few things.
Right. Again, not being scientific evidence. Okay, we're not getting anywhere.
If you see that,
you're never going to understand that Koine Greek. I tried to get you to admit why the Koine Greek thing was irrelevant to this discussion, and you won't get that.
We're not talking about the English word faith.
I understand. We're talking about in whatever word in the context that implication is implied. Got it. But you're never going to get that it doesn't matter what it means in Koine Greek if it's implied in a sentence that it should be taken on trust because I said so or in my authority rather than because of scientific evidence. I get that you're never going to get that.
And you presuppose that as long as they say you don't see.
I don't presuppose anything. You've demonstrated repeatedly that this is what you're going to keep doing without correction, that you're never going to correct yourself. You should have by now. I shouldn't have to repeat this explanation so many times. So this is not a presupposition.
Whenever you see someone have quotes, some of the quotes I saw said things like appealing them to saying, it's not evidence you see or something you see, as if seen is a necessary requirement for something being evidence. And you even said it's not earlier. So just because someone says that they talk about faith and then they mention things that they don't see, doesn't automatically mean it's not evidence. And by your standards, you even said earlier, not necessarily, it doesn't disqualify it as not being scientific evidence. So, and I think that's a mistake that you were making.
Okay, I didn't make a mistake.
Okay, of course not.
Yeah, of course not. And if I had, two things would have happened. One, you would have shown it, and two, I would have admitted.
Okay.
But if you can't do the first one, how can you get to the second one?
Okay.
You have to understand what you're criticizing first, and you're making painfully obvious that you don't. But thank you for, seriously, sincerely, thank you for coming on to have this discussion with me.
No, thank you for having me on. And I've said before that I've wanted to start doing this. And this is before I knew I was talking to you, but I want to stick to my word. And if you say no, I'm not going to be offended. I like to ask two questions. What keeps you from Christianity? And whatever your answer is, I'd like to, if possible, buy a book for you if you would read it. And the second question would be, could I pray for you before we end?
You could write a letter to Santa for all the good it'll do.
Okay, but I don't want to write a letter to Santa. I was asking.
You're effectively the same thing. What you want to do is wish upon a star. So
if God does not exist, so you're presupposing God doesn't exist, but you're starting to.
No, that's not a presupposition. Again, if I started believing
yes or no.
God,
it's a yes or
and
no.
then I start investigating and
yes
realize that God is not a thing,
it's a yes
or no. That's not a presupposition.
You can't. So you can't even answer a simple question like that without getting.
I can answer the simple question. Yeah, I did. If you want to pray for me, go ahead. It doesn't matter. Now, as far as the book, I'm open to knowledge. I really am. I don't want to be misunderstood about this.
Okay.
Okay. The fact is, it's just a matter of time. I've just signed up again. I'm not only am I having to do 6 videos a month, for which I do nothing all day already. Then I get up my keyboard. I stay at my keyboard till I can't stay awake anymore. That's pretty much my day, as it is. But then I just started an anthropology degree program at ASU online, and so
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I'm very excited to do this. So that means that I'm going to have conservatively 18 hours. It's 36 hours a week of homework that I'm going to do on top of what I'm already doing. So I don't have time to read a book. I don't want to seem incurious. I don't want to seem biased against the idea. I just flat don't have time.
Okay. Now, can I pray with you?
With me? Why do I have to wish upon a star with you?
Can I pray before we just? And if you say no, that's fine.
Why would I be offended? If you want to talk to yourself on my behalf, go right ahead.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Lord, I thank you for this night. I thank you for Aaron and his life. And I just pray, Lord, that whatever strongholds are blocking him, Father God, that you would just speak to him, Lord, that you'd bring about some conviction, Lord. Give him what he's looking for if he truly is looking for it. And I just pray that you would bless his life, Lord, and that you would do what it takes, Father God. But again, I just at least want to thank you for his life and for what he's doing and whatever he aspires to be, Father. I pray that he would seek you for that. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you. I appreciate.
If I may say so, I've always felt that I've had a blessed life. It's a strange thing. I always thought for the longest time, I thought that terrible tragedy would not befall me because great riches and surprise things like that didn't befall me either, that I ran some kind of middle road thing. It was like a trade-off with the fates. And now I feel, you know, I'm going to be 57 years old soon. And honestly, if I were run over by a truck tomorrow, I would say that I had a pretty good run. I'm really happy with my life as it has been.
Oh, it's awesome.
All right.
Well, thanks.
All right. Good night.
Night.